What's up, everybody? It's Realistic with Realistic Productions, and I'm going to be doing another tutorial for Soundoracle.net. And in this video right here, I'm going to be doing something just a little bit different than mixing and mastering techniques. I'm going to go over file and session preparation for what you need to do when you're sending your files to either a mix or mastering engineer, or if you're going to be collaborating with somebody else. And I'm going to answer some questions as far as what the format should be, what the overall level should be, how you can get it out of the DAW, and should you normalize, should you not normalize, just questions like that. That way you can have the most success when you're getting your files to an engineer or a collaborator. So what we're going to do is we're going to go inside the DAW and we're going to answer those questions there.
All right, so I got Pro Tools open up here, but as I always say, these tips and techniques will work in any DAW. In fact, I'm going to show you how to use some of these techniques in different DAWs. So the first thing that you want to do as far as when you're prepping things to collaborate or send to a mix engineer when you're getting your stems out is you want to make sure that everything has the same starting point. And as you can see in this session, these do not have the same starting point. And so if these were to just be exported out the way that they are now, they would sound like chaos. So here's how it's supposed to sound.
She wants rings, she wants cars. Don't want planes, she wants Mars.
Now, if these get exported out where the starting spot is there, and then this gets exported where the starting spot is there, let me show you how this will end up sounding.
Place, she wants Mars. I can do
right. It sounds messy, and a lot of times too, when people send me these incorrectly, the vocals will be like that of like different takes and everything like that. So then everything's really gonna sound off.
Sex all day, sex all night.
Right? So all of that sounds really messy and off, and it would take a really long time for somebody to have to like move these around and figure out exactly where they need to go off of. So you make everybody's life much easier if you do this. So the first thing to do is you want to make sure that they all have the same starting point, and the easiest way to do that is you can consolidate the clips. So if you're a Pro Tools user like I am, it's just Command-Shift-3 on a Mac, and now everything has the same exact starting spot. And so you want to make sure that they're all lined up there. So that's the first thing, and that's the one that's really important. Another thing too is if you do consolidate your clips here, so let's say we got like a bunch of chops and stuff in here, you want to make sure before you do that, let's say these are different takes, that you want to make sure everything is smooth with crossfades and stuff as well, and that way you're not getting any pops and clicks, because if there's pops or clicks in there, there may be plugins that can remove it or get rid of it, but it does also remove other things, and it can give artifacts in the audio, whether you're using Isotope's renowned RX or you're using something else from Waves, their sound field stuff. You're still going to get some artifacts in there, and you're still going to depreciate the quality, so it's best to avoid that in the beginning if you can. So those are two important factors there. Another thing that you want to make sure, rarely does anybody ever do this, and it is a miracle when somebody actually does, is you want to make sure that there is plenty of headroom, even though there's stems. And stems are a little bit easier for adjustment, though, than people send me a full stereo mix, because I can just trim things down. But still, it's, if you can, you want to be able to send things to where there's headroom. So as you can see in this session, I have some headroom. Let me go to where the drums are when things get louder.
She wants rings, she wants cars. Don't want planes, she wants Mars. I can do.
So there's some headroom right there as far as what is being able to be exported out of here, and then that way when they're mixing it or mastering it, they can have the ability to go places because there's actually some headroom. All right, so something else to consider is, let's say that you're a machine user. So let me pull up an instance of machine here. This is a common one right here, where people don't churn down the input of their machine outputs and everything. So they got these great sounding drums that they've gotten from really reputable places online. These are high quality samples, but the sample quality is lowered because their machine output has been clipping because everything's at 0. So it's wise before you get this out of machine, if you churn down things, right? And so what I've actually done for me is I've created a template. I got a whole production template where I have an instance of machine where everything is already churned down, so I don't have to worry about this later. And then also I have the group master churned down a little bit as well, just to give myself a little bit of headroom. And that way, when I'm getting things out of machine, they're not pushed to 0 and they're not clipping and distorting, and it makes the quality a lot better because, like I always say, if you've seen my tutorials before, when you're dealing with audio, you want to view it like you're dealing with cooking, and you want to start out with the best possible, freshest ingredients that you can. And then that way, you will be able to have the best overall quality because the fix it and the mix thing, more often than not, is a complete myth, and it's not real because there's certain things that you can do and there's certain things you can polish and fix, but the problem is if things are very damaged, it doesn't matter what people do, you can't fix certain things, and if things are really clipped or distorted, you can't fix those. So that's what you want to do if you're using machine, or if you're using other samplers or stuff like that where you're pulling it out. Just make sure that the output is down a little bit before you route those out. If you do need to route things out of machine, all you got to do is create your tracks. Let's say you got 6 tracks in there in machine, and then you just route your inputs right here. What's really cool about Pro Tools is if you hit Shift Option Command, it will cascade. So you saw that all I had to do was just go there. It just automatically went 2 through 7 right there for my outputs. And then 2, if you're using other softwares, just same thing. And so then you want to make sure that everything that's being routed out matches up. And so then all you got to do from there is just hit record, and then you just print it back in, and that's how you route. If you are indeed using machine, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're doing a different genre, and you're not even thinking about using a software like that. But just in case, that is something to consider there. So, all right, so now that you have your levels and everything like that and where it needs to be, what you can do in Pro Tools, if you want to keep these effects in there, you can just commit all of these. And then too, if you're committed to the reverb and delay and stuff that you have in there, go ahead and send that. It's usually best if you're getting this stuff mixed by somebody else, send this as separate tracks versus on there. That way the mix engineer can at least control it and make some decisions there. So what you want to do is you just want to commit the tracks. There's a few ways you can do this in Pro Tools. You can right click on the track, hit commit, or you can hit Option Shift C, and then you want to make sure that your pan and volume is also committed when you're doing this. That way everything is exactly where you want it to be as far as levels, and you have the pans in there that you're committed to and that you want. So now that you have these committed and you have everything going on with the levels here, you'll want to make sure that you have things properly labeled. And so what you want to do is you'll want to make sure that your stems are labeled. So usually the first thing that's really nice to have is the instrument name, and then add in the title of the session or song or beat or whatever it is called. And then if you know it, put in the key signature in there, and then also go ahead and put in the BPM here. That way, all the information is needed there, and if anything ever gets lost or anything like that, you know what everything is, and you're well aware. And then just go ahead and you want to name that. A lot of DAWs will also allow you to just be able to export right out, and it'll already just label it whatever the session is. So when you go and export out, if you do it in other ones, what you want to do is make sure that the title of the session is named like that as well, so then the information is already there. So if you're using Pro Tools, All you got to do to get these out is you just got to, assuming that all of these were labeled right, you hit Command-Shift-K, you choose the folder that you want it to go to. Usually what I do is I just name a folder of whatever it may be, right? And so I'll put stems in there. Sometimes I'll just go ahead and throw in all the other useful information too, so the people know. And then you just hit create, you hit open, and then you hit export. And then you just export the files out, and now they are ready to be used for a mix or mastering engineer. Another thing too to consider, Pro Tools here, I don't have to worry about it because when I export out of here, it doesn't focus on anything that is on the master fader. But if you're using other DAWs, and like let's say that you have a limiter on there or a bus compressor or some type of saturation or distortion, you're going to want to go ahead and bypass that and make it inactive. That way it doesn't affect it, and that the mix engineer is able to get the session how it is supposed to be. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and close out of this session, and we'll go ahead and import another session so then you can see how things look when somebody gets it on the other end here. So let's go ahead and close out of this. Make a new one. We'll name it City Vibes, as if I was going to get this from somebody else. And then because when I've received the file, I'll know the key signature and the BPM, and I am indeed responsible. I will make sure that that's in there so I know. And then so we'll go ahead and we'll throw this in a session here. Client mixes. Name it after the artist. None of this stuff really applies to you if you're sending it to me, but what I'll do then is, because I know the BPM, and you've made life easy for me, I can just change that there, and then I can import it. And then what I can do is I can go to where they were. So let me speed through this really quick. So I got all of these files. I can throw these in here. And as you can see, once it's in here, everything is lined up exactly how it is. They all have the same starting spot. And if I create a master fader here,
She wants rings, she wants cars. Don't want planes, she wants Mars.
these files are all at Unity, and it's beautiful because nothing is in the red more often than not. Everything is sent to me where it's like this.
She wants rings, she wants cars. Don't want planes.
And it sounds awful. And so it makes life a lot easier if you can avoid that as well. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you as far as what mastering. It's just the same thing if you're just preparing the files for mastering. It's really not much more information I'm going to give you, but just so you know, what you want to do is you want to make sure that nothing is cut off. So you want to make sure that your timeline is not like this. You want to make sure when you bounce it out or export it out that you have the full session here. That way the mastering engineer is able to master your full song. I know it seems obvious, but it has definitely happened where things will be either cut off in the beginning, the end, or both. And then the big thing is, just like the stems, you want to make sure that you have plenty of headroom.
There. Don't want planes, she wants Mars.
Which in this case we already know it does, but sometimes, just like we did before, you just create a group, you turn things down if need be.
Don't want planes.
And then that way there is headroom, and then you export it out like that. That way the mastering engineer has plenty of headroom and then is able to actually master it to the best of its ability, and then can make a lot of the decisions from there too. And also, if you have anything on your master channel like bus compressor or some type of saturation or something like that, what you want to do is, unless you're really, really, really committed to it, and I mean, you really got to be committed to this, and I would also say you really got to know what you're doing on your master bus if you really want to go this route. But more often than not, disable those. That way he's able to make these decisions as far as exciters, saturation, compression, EQ, limiting, and you want to make sure that he has everything that he needs to make that happen. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip over to different DAWs and show you how to get stems out of there so you know how to prepare your sessions within those different DAWs. If Ableton is the DAW that you're using and you need to get the stems out of there, you're just going to go to File, you're going to go to Export Audio/Video, or you can hit, if you're using a Mac, Command-Shift-R. And then when you want to go to rendered track, instead of master, you want to drop this down and hit all individual tracks. And then you want to choose where your start is, and you want to start this from the beginning and then start it from the end of the song of where that may or may not be. You want to make sure that normalize is off. Don't normalize that. And then you want to make sure that you got your sample rate set of what it is and your bit depth. You can leave dither off. You can save that for your mastering engineer, and then you just hit export, and then it will pop up the folder of where it needs to go. And then that's how you export your stems out of Ableton. So when you're using Logic and you want to be able to export all your stems out, you just want to make sure that you have your marker starting at the beginning, and then you want to make sure that you go up to File, Export, all tracks as audio files right here, or you can hit Command-Shift-E, and then you just want to choose a folder and then just go ahead and create like a new folder for it, name it the session of whatever it is, and then go ahead and create that, save it in there, and then you can choose your bit depth. Usually you want to choose 24. Sometimes people choose 16 if they wanted to just be ready for CD quality, but 24 is usually the preferred, and same with if you just go with Wave, and then that allows you to get that out of Logic. If you are using Reason and you want to export your stems out of there to get them to your Collaborator or Mix Engineer, you just want to make sure that your marker, your start marker, is starting from the beginning, as if you choose to go elsewhere, it may start at like 5, measure 5, and then everything gets cut off. So what you want to do is you want to go up to File, you want to go to Bounce Mixer Channels, and this allows you to right here choose if you want all your settings to be applied or if you want to make sure that they're not on there. So if your EQs and your effects were part of the creative process and you want those on there, you'll check all. It also gives you the option to bounce out your master section and mixer channels. More often than not, if you're getting the stems mixed or your Collaborator, you won't need to send this. But if you do want to send this as a reference track of what the whole stereo sound sounds like, you'll add that. And then you'll choose your bit depth here, your sample rate. You'll choose between Wave or eighth. Both will work in any setting. Wave is just kind of the universal one at this point, but both will work. And then you just hit OK, and then that's how you will be able to send those stems within Reason. When you're bouncing out of Pro Tools or any other DAW, you are going to want to make sure a couple things. When you're bouncing out, you want to make sure that you have your files as interleave. That just means that they're going to look like this right here, this one that I'm hovering over, where left and right are one file, versus if they're multiple mono, the person will get a separate file for left and a separate file for right. Mono summed is just when everything is just mono, but it's summed coming down. So make sure it's interleaved. And a big thing that you want to make sure is that you do not send MP3s for somebody to mix. You always want to make sure that they are WAV or AV files. If you send them MP3 files, you're going to be giving them files that are compressed. You're going to be giving them files that are lower in quality, and you're also going to be giving them the chance to start creating phase cancellation problems within there, because MP3s do adjust the phase and it can create a lot of problems. So just make sure that you're sending waves and everything, because MP3 is definitely not the preferred solution. So a big mistake that a lot of people make is they normalize their audio clips before they send it off to an engineer or somebody they're collaborating with. And the reason why that is an issue is when you go to normalize something, all it's doing is it's going to take the highest peak in the audio file and it's going to raise it up to 0. So if this is the highest peak, let's say in this entire audio file, it's going to lift it up to 0. right? And then it's going to move everything else up by the same amount. So if this piece took 6 dB to get to 0, it will raise this piece up by 6 dB as well. And so it can create some problems. So I'll show you what this sounds like. This is just some hi-hats. What it sounds like before and after. Okay, and then I'll go and I'll normalize it right here. All right, so it sounds louder. Doesn't sound better, it just sounds louder. And so a lot of times people have this misconception. For some reason in this industry that we're in, there's this really weird, unhealthy misconception that when things are louder, they sound better and the quality is better. And in fact, it's the exact opposite. When things are louder, the quality diminishes. When things are louder, the quality is worse and it lessens. And so things actually sound better when they're not louder. And so there's a couple things of why, when you normalize something, of why it's an issue. First, you've taken away any headroom that the engineer can now have because the highest peak is now at 0. The other reason is when you normalize stuff, it creates some artifacts sometimes. It can create pops and clicks. It can create static sounds. It can create harsh clipping, distortion, a bunch of really bad stuff in it. And more times than not, when people normalize something, I can tell right away that it was normalized. And every time I have to message them and ask them, hey, can you resend me the audio files and don't normalize them? Because I can hear, and for one, there's no headroom, and there a lot of times the audio is just unusable because of all the extra artifacts that are in there. And it's fairly easy to avoid normalizing. It actually takes more work to normalize than it does to not do it. So you can avoid it if you're using something like Pro Tools. All you have to do is just not go to the normalize plugin and apply it to every clip. That actually saves you time not to normalize. If you're using other DAWs, for instance, Ableton, and when you go to export, there's a box for you to click that says normalize. All you have to do is just resist clicking it. And so you'll find that your stuff will sound a lot better and the people that are mixing your stuff will be a lot happier. And you don't need to bring stuff that loud, because if they're mixing and they're mastering it, they're going to be able to control stuff. They'll be able to raise volumes. They'll be able to raise gain. They can limit stuff, compress stuff. They'll be able to handle all of that. All right, so those are the basic things that you want to be able to do as far as when you're prepping sessions and getting them ready for a mix or mastering engineer. And so hopefully this is some information that helps you out. Hopefully it makes your collaborations a lot easier in the future, or if you're dealing with mix engineers, you'll make them a lot more happy. If you're having me as your mix engineer, you'll definitely make me a lot more happy, because I'll have headroom, I'll have all the files starting from the beginning, and what that means is you'll be able to get your product back not only faster, but better quality. So I'm hoping that you got a lot out of this tutorial today. Hopefully there's some information that was useful. If you're getting a lot out of this but you want to see more, please feel free to comment below. Let us know what kind of tutorials that you want to see in the future, and Oracle and I can definitely make that happen. We're always trying to find the content that you want to see. If you're liking what you're hearing from me, you can find me everywhere on social media at Realistic Productions. You can find me at the web, realisticproductions.net. You can find my man Soundoracle everywhere at Soundoracle. And if you're looking for the best 808s, the best kicks, the best snares with the craziest loops and samples you can find on the internet right now, go to soundoracle.net. All right, till next time.
From Soundoracle.